Hello class. Today we are going to talk about 11.1. So we're starting chapter 11. We are going to start with inverse variation. Our learning target today, we want to define and use two different forms of inverse variation to study real world situations, and just one vocab word, inverse variation. So let's get started. What is inverse variation? So, in the past we have talked about direct variation. With direct variation, we use this formula, y is equal to kx. Okay? And the thing about this is as x gets bigger, y will get bigger with it. What we're going to do now is we're going to do inverse variation. For inverse variation, we are instead going to do this. Y is equal to k over x. Now let's think about this for a second. If my x value gets bigger, meaning we have a bigger and bigger value in the denominator, the value of this side gets smaller. Think about it this way. If you have 1 over 2, our value is 0.5. If I have 1 over 3, our value is 0.3 repeating. If I have 1 over 4, my value is 0.25, okay? As the denominator gets bigger, the value gets smaller and smaller and smaller. So, with inverse variation, as x gets bigger, y gets smaller. So they vary inversely. Direct variation means they vary directly. As one gets bigger, the other gets bigger. But inverse variation, they vary inversely, meaning as one gets bigger, the other gets smaller. So that's what we're going to be looking at. Inverse variation. Alright? Now, we'll be using that equation, like I said, y is equal to k over x. But we're also going to need to find k. So we can find k as y times x, or x times y. Right? And that's just by solving for k by multiplying both sides by x. So those are the two equations we're going to use. So let's say, like in this example, as soon as they say if y varies inversely as x, as soon as you read y varies inversely as x, we think of those two equations. Y is equal to k over x, and k is equal to y times x. They tell me that y is 5 when x is 15. We want to write an equation to show how y is related to x. Well, to write an equation to show how y is related to x, we need to know k. So let's start by finding k. K is equal to y times x, or in this case, k is equal to y, which is 5, times x, which is 15. So my k will be equal to 75. Alright, so that's k. Great. Now all we need to do is write our equation. So y is equal to, let's use the k value we just found, 75. And that's our final answer. So if they tell me that y varies inversely as x, and y is 5 and x is 15, the equation that relates x and y would be y is equal to 75 over x. Let's keep going. Now, if we have a missing variable, if we're looking to solve for a missing variable, we can do this one of two ways. The first way is going to be very similar to what we just did in that last slide. We're going to find our equation. And then we're going to use it. Okay? So we find k, we write our equation, then we use our equation. The other way, which is what typically students end up preferring, is this equation here. x1 times y1 is equal to x2 times y2. Let's try both. So let's say y varies inversely as x. Okay? They tell me that y is equal to 4 when x is equal to 3, and that we want to find x when y is 12. So we're going to do this one of two ways. The first way, let's use those equations. Y is equal to k over x, and k is equal to yx. Let's start by finding k. So k is equal to y times x. So we can use when we have both the information. So 4 times 3, so k is equal to 12. We then use that information to write an equation. Y is equal to 12 over x. Alright, and we want to know x when y is equal to 12. So I plug in 12 for y. So now we just need to solve this equation. I want to get that x out of the denominator. Let's multiply both sides by x. That leaves me with 12x is equal to 12. To solve for x, I divide both sides by that 12. I end up with x is equal to 1. So, if y varies inversely as x, and y is equal to 4 when x is equal to 3, I know that x is equal to 1 when y is equal to 12. Now how about that other method? So that other method told us that x1, y1 is equal to x2 times y2. Well, my x1 and my y1 can be y is equal to 4 and x is equal to 3. So let's plug those in. So x is equal to 3, y is equal to 4. That's equal to x2 times y2. So I don't know my x sub 2, but I know what my y sub 2 could be. So I'm going to leave that as just x, and then my y as 12. So this leaves me with 12 is equal to 12x. Now we just need to solve the equation. We solve for x by dividing both sides by 12, leaving me with x is equal to 1. So it's two different ways of finding the same thing. We can either create an equation and then use it, or plug it into this method. And that's how we find our missing variable. So that's all I need you to know for 11.1 for now. We had that one learning target. We defined and we used two different forms of inverse variation to find that missing variable. Get your homework done.